Okay, so just follow along on page 225, okay? So at the very top in that banner, what does it tell you to do? Visualizing electron transport. So we must be talking about not just electron transport, that's too specific. What is maybe not quite as specific? In other words, how do plants make food for themselves? Photosynthesis. This is an important process in photosynthesis. So, and at the top where it says figure 8, just follow along and we'll explain what we've been talking about this last week or somewhere along those lines. So figure 8. Activated electrons are passed from one molecule to another along the thylakoid membrane in a chloroplast. The energy from electrons is used to form a proton gradient. As protons move down a concentration gradient, a phosphate is added to ADP, forming ATP. And we're going to explain why is something like that so important. We're going to visualize that right now. Okay, so now we're just reading these letters inside this box, A, B, C, I don't know how many there are. So letter A, light energy absorbed by photosystem 2. Even if we didn't go any further, if we were to visualize, what is this sunlight going to do to something inside the leaves of these plants? Something's going to get broken. Something gets broken. No. See, that's the very end process. So you're not totally wrong. I do understand where you're coming from, but that's not what we're looking for here. Something gets broken apart. That's close. Water. Okay. So in photosystem 2, used to split a molecule of water. When water splits, oxygen is released from the cell. See, if we do this is where things get missed, okay? And then that's where we have a potential problem, okay? So then when this water is split, oxygen is released from the cell, protons, okay, from the hydrogens. That's very important because it drives some of these electrons, and that's why they call it the electron transport chain. Okay, so this hydrogen stay in the thylakoid space, and an activated electron enters the electron transport chain. And what's driving that? These hydrogen ions drive that electron down towards the end, and we'll illustrate why that's so important. So letter B, as electrons move through the membrane, protons are pumped into the thylakoid space. Letter C, at photosystem 1, electrons are re-energized and in this NADPH is formed. Letter D, chemoosmosis, protons accumulate in the thylakoid space, creating a concentration gradient. So, after this water molecule has been split, the hydrogen ions come inside the cell membrane, okay? And we've talked about this multiple times, but maybe there's some confusion with that. Here's our water molecule. This gets split, okay? So now you have all of these hydrogen ions, and you have oxygen then as well, okay? So it doesn't matter the number that what we see here. Is the hydrogen ions higher on the outside or on the inside? So these diffuse across that membrane very easily because the gradient, it goes downhill, okay? So does the oxygen because that water molecule has been split. So now we have these electrons that are associated from here. When these electrons get broken apart, this hydrogen pushes that electron down, and then oxygen can't be by itself because it's this term that starts with a D from last year. Fusion. No. Halogens and gases are this term. Starts with a D from physical science. It's di something. No, it could be. They're diatomic. So then that causes these to bond together, and this is why oxygen's given off. So the most important process here then, okay, letter E. Letter E says, when protons move across the thylakoid membrane through ATP synthetase, ADP is converted to ATP, okay? And we've seen this before too. Okay, so these hydrogen ions cause this enzyme. This enzyme will cause a bond to form here. So this can then be stored now by the plant in the form of ATP, because then when it needs to start growing or for any other metabolic processes, what happens when this bond is broken? Something is given off that the plant can use. Not oxygen. No. No. When you break this bond, energy is given off when you break that bond. Okay? So that's very important for these plants to be able to do this, to create energy for themselves. Okay. So then the last thing we want to do is, and this is talking about on page 226, we're going to abbreviate this quite a bit, because in the Calvin cycle, which is light independent, so does it need sunlight to do this? No, because it's independent of that. Okay, so in the final step, we're about halfway down on page 226. It says, in the final step of the Calvin cycle, an enzyme called Rubisco, we've seen that before, okay? Rubisco converts the remaining, all these molecules into different types of sugars, which then can continue the cycle, because Rubisco converts inorganic carbon dioxide molecules into organic molecules that can be used by the cell. It is considered one of the most important biological enzymes on the planet, you could say, okay? So we've talked about two enzymes this chapter. What are they? That's one.
APT.
You're close.
ATP.
TP.
You just didn't say the second word. ATP synthetase. This is the other enzyme. Okay? All right. Plants use the sugar formed during the Calvin cycle both as a source of energy and as building blocks for complex carbohydrates, including cellulose, which provides structural support for plants. So two different ways that plants produce energy. One, the light reactions, or photosynthesis. Water split. Hydrogen drives that electron acceptor, or that electron down to the final electron acceptor, which is oxygen. Then this is given off as a byproduct. Hydrogen ions cause this enzyme. What does this enzyme do? It doesn't break the bond. It connects and brings them together. Okay? So once this bond is formed, you've got ATP. Okay? There's a stimulus that says, okay, plant, I need energy. So what's going to happen to this bond then when it needs energy? It breaks it again. Okay? Then this cycle just keeps repeating itself. Okay? Photosynthesis, this enzyme causes more, and it's just not one molecule of ADP, it's filled with that. And all that's going to do is convert more ADP into ATP to be stored, break that bond, create energy, and that cycle just continues over and over and over again. Okay, so that's all I have. Tomorrow we'll talk about alternative pathways, and then we'll possibly get into cellular respiration, which is for animals and humans. All right, we'll catch up to you next time.